And welcome back, everybody, to another exciting Money Moves. I'm glad to have you here. I'm your host, John Cleaver, with the ever awesome Wendy Lee.
Hey, good to see everybody.
Good deal. So today we're going to talk about some exciting stuff. We just wrapped up, our tax season. Some of you filed extensions and things like that. So we're actually going to be talking about the top 5 things to trigger an IRS audit, which is not something you want to go through. Knock on wood. Not going to happen, and don't even speak that into existence. But we do want to talk about some of the things that you may be doing that are going to trigger that. So grab your pen and paper, and let's get started here in just a few minutes. So yeah, let's talk about that awesome IRS audit. So not that anybody wants that, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, excuse me. But you look at the IRS and their role in our paychecks. Obviously, our government does a lot of great things for not only our country but countries around the world. I scratch my head at that sometimes, but a good government needs some kind of tax revenue, and so I always joke about the IRS with regards to how they look at our money. So if you take those two words, and everybody knows the government loves their acronyms, right? But if you take those two words, the IRS, and don't put a space in between, just spell it out, THEIRS. What does that spell?
Theirs.
Spells theirs, because they're trying to figure out a way to make your money their money. But all kidding aside, an audit is definitely something you don't want to go through. But there's some things that's, as long as you're being upfront and, forthright, and maybe have a little help preparing your taxes, you can avoid it. But there are some things that actually trigger it. Fortunately, I've never gone through that. I don't know, Wendy, have you ever gone through an audit, an IRS audit?
No, thankfully. It just stresses me out. Like
That's
the whole
one
tax
I
thing in
know, right?
general stresses me out.
No, that's one thing that I don't mess with that. It's like I'll stay in the safe zone. I mean, I've got a good accountant that does my taxes for me. I've got a tax strategist, not just a tax preparer, a tax advisor versus a tax preparer. And we've talked about the difference between the two in past episodes, but it's something that I like to err a little on the side of caution, just because you don't want to trigger that audit. It's something that I've not gone through, but I've had some friends or acquaintances rather that have gone through that, and it's like running the gauntlet. So I try to make sure I'm above board and everything, and my accountant covers my butt and makes sure that we've got all the I's dotted, T's crossed, and paperwork in on time.
Right.
But there are some things that a lot of not a lot, but people do, especially entrepreneurs, maybe not even realizing that, hey, you're putting yourself at risk or things like that for an audit. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And the number one thing, is looking at unreported income. I'm making a little money on this or whatever, and I'm not going to report that income. Or maybe you forget to report some income because you got multiple streams and it wasn't a lot. But looking at things like if you've got a hobby or a side hustle you're making money from, you want to keep track of that, right? And that's part of the thing. If you recall, I think it was about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Biden first came in office. So I guess it was 3 years ago. But looking at the Venmo, the Zells, the Cash Apps, things like that, those it's called the gray market, where you're making cash under the table, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that's reportable now, especially if you're using those apps, right? And we talked about that, but hobby, freelance income. I don't know, Wendy, if you can think of some others that kind of pop in your
Well,
mind.
I actually had this pop up in my own situation because I did network marketing, and I got 1099s for my network marketing companies. Working with you, I get a 1099. But when I created my own course and did my own coaching, I had people pay me through Stripe. And I was waiting for a 1099, and unless you hit a certain threshold with them, which is pretty high, you don't get a 1099. So you just have to go about your own and report it. And so I actually had to go back and correct a tax return because realized after the fact that I totally forgot to put a whole chunk of change in there from a Stripe account. So yeah, there are some payment if you're, that's something for entrepreneurs to be aware of, that if you're using Stripe to receive payments, unless you hit a certain threshold with them, they're not sending you a 1099, and you have to make sure and you report that income.
Yeah, and that's key. Again, working with a good bookkeeper or tax preparer. What account are you having to go into a business account? Are you set up as a C corp, S corp, or whatever the case may be? And maybe you have that money going directly into your business account, and it's reported on your tax documents that way. But yeah, if you've got an income stream that's solopreneur and they're not issuing a 1099, you definitely want to report that. Another one is cryptocurrency income. A lot of people, oh, it's crypto, and the IRS came out a few years ago, and it even states that on the IRS return, if you have crypto accounts or had transactions, you've got to report it. And if you don't, that's some serious repercussions on that. It's not the little slap on the hand like you forgot to do X. It's
Yeah.
pretty serious. So, crypto income, foreign
And for
income, investment earnings
gambling.
or dividends. If you claim some, or take a disbursement or sell off some stock or something like that, you've got to report that as income because again, they want theirs out of yours. And rightfully so. It's the law of the land. So just follow it. And again, that's why it's so good to have a good tax advisor kind of helping you out a little bit.
Mhm.
So that's number one, is that unreported income. Number
And
two, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say real quick in there, gambling as well, which is becoming more and more a thing with this online
Yeah.
gambling. But I
Yep.
know someone personally that makes a lot of money gambling, and yeah, it gets a little sticky too with that.
It can.
Yeah.
So then you look at claiming on unauthorized deductions, kind of on the other side, and again, this is a lot of gray area, and it's easy to go down that slippery slope as an entrepreneur. Those business meals, that business vehicle, the home office deduction. That's a big trigger, right? As far as those deductions and whatnot. A lot of people are working from home now, and unless you're self-employed, that doesn't mean you get the home business deduction, right? Or operating out of you. So it's something that you definitely want to make sure you're not playing in the gray because those are some things that can really trigger. Now, I'm not saying you can't deduct those things off if they're legitimate, things like that. But again, that's why it's so critical that you have, a tax advisor kind of guiding you through on what you can and can't do. And, if you own a business, especially entrepreneur, things like that, you may think that you can do it with TurboTax or one of the other softwares out there. And there's a lot of great software tools, don't get me wrong. But I would rather pay a little extra to make sure that my butt's covered and that all that stuff's being done properly and the math's done properly. And they're not only just taking advantage of the deductions and things like that, but giving me advice on what I could be doing to pay, either less taxes or make it, hey, you actually need to pay a little more in this area, or you're gonna get in some serious trouble. So that's something too. Those unauthorized tax deductions, losses, or credit. I don't know if you've got any additional insight on that, Wendy.
No, I mean, it reminds me of that clip that goes around online. Isn't that a write-off? But it's a write-off. But it's a write-off. What is it from Schitt's Creek? So,
Yeah, they'll
but,
never know. They'll know. It's a write-off.
but
How do you know it's a write? That was a different one. But yeah, the
yeah,
the write-off scenario. Who
doesn't
writes
cost
it off? Well,
anything.
you
It's a
just write
write-off.
it off. It's just covered. You don't pay for it.
But yeah,
So
I
that's
mean,
funny.
I listened to a tax strategist that she says, ask how can it be written off, right? Don't just assume it
Mhm.
is a write-off, but how can it be written off? A lot of times as an entrepreneur, you can write things off, but you've got to have the
Mhm.
proper documentation and
That's key.
yeah, and make sure it's all on the up and up. So,
Yeah, that's key. Going back to talking about the vehicle write-off, a lot of people just the mileage, you've got to have y properly tracked forms, and that is such a pain in the butt. I remember back in the day, doing the paper forms,
mm,
or paper tracking. Now there's a lot of different apps out there. Me personally, I use Mile IQ. I love it. It's automatic. And it'll ask you, is this a personal trip or a business trip? And you just swipe left or right to determine it. And then it'll spit out a report at the end of the year saying, okay, this is what it's all about. And this is your reporting turn into your tax preparer or with your actual tax forms if needed. So that's something that, again, going back to what you just said, have the documentation.
Mhm.
Don't just assume it's a write-off, right? Business meals, they changed the format on that on what you can actually take as a deduction. Is it with your, internal team, or is it with a business client, or whatever the case may be? So there's a lot of different rules on that. So you've got to do well in tracking that. So um, the other kind of obvious thing is, or maybe I guess it's not so obvious, is if there are a lot of rounded numbers or, math errors on your report, if you're not tracking or reporting down to the penny, if you're just saying, it's just call it, $250 instead of 249.98 or something like
Right.
that. Those are triggers, and the algorithms and stuff like that. And I'm sure Ted and Susan at the IRS aren't going through and looking at all this stuff you're reporting, but it's all digitized and everything now. A lot of AI going in and identifying this. And the reason we actually are coming up and talking about this is there was an article just released that the IRS audits are going to be increased dramatically this year. So that's something that I'm like, talk to Wendy about it. She's like, yeah, we should probably talk about this. So,
Mhm.
the math errors again, if you're using a calculator and a number two pencil, that's you can have some errors, which again is why use the systems out there and things like that, or a lot of those rounded numbers. What rounded numbers mean is you're not really
Right.
tracking any of this.
It's
You're just
not,
kind
yeah.
of coming in with
Guessing,
a swag number. So
guesstimating.
guesstimating, there you go. You're guesstimating and possibly inappropriately, but that's
Yeah.
kind of a little flag to the IRS that yeah, they're probably not really tracking it. It's more of just kind of putting some numbers in to make it work, right?
Mhm.
So that's the third one. So number four is an issue that I honestly kind of forgot about this, and I'm sure a lot of other people did too. But during COVID-19, there was a internal revenue code put into play that allowed you to access, because a lot of people were displaced and things like that. That a lot of people, were able to tap into their retirement account without any penalty. And that's something I don't know. I don't know of anybody that did that. I don't know. Do you have any experience with that, or know anybody that did
No, I
that,
didn't
Wendy?
even know that was a thing until you mentioned
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
So
well, and that's why I forgot about it, because I remember when it came out, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And it was kind of the buzz for a hot minute of allowing people to access their 401k or old IRA or something like that. Which I've got some mixed emotions about that, for the simple fact that okay, you do that, you take out 10,000 a day, but that's probably like 80,000 that you just robbed from your future self. But
mhm.
you do what you got to do. I get it. But it's one of those things that there were some guidelines set to that. So you either had to pay that back within 3 years, or you had to declare and claim that as income. And you could spread it over 3 years, but again, you had to do one or the other.
Mhm.
And my guess is a lot of people took that money out and just kind of forgot about it. And maybe they paid it back, maybe they didn't. But I could see in a lot of old IRAs of just saying, "Hey, we're going to pull this out COVID-19, avoid that 10% penalty, but you still have to claim that as income if you didn't pay it back." And I'm guessing that the IRS is going to be looking at that pretty heavily in 2024, because we're at that mark now, and even next year as well. So that's item number four. And then lastly, I don't know, have you seen or noticed a lot of and maybe it's just my algorithm and stuff like that, but a lot of expat stuff. We work with some expats and retirees and things like that, so maybe that's why it's popping up in my feed. But about you can get dual citizenship, or you can get
Yeah.
move here and you can open foreign bank accounts. And a lot of foreign countries now are, you don't even have to be on site. You can actually just open up a foreign bank account online.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that at all?
Well, that I've had a lot of quite a few, not a lot, but a good handful of friends leave the country and, move to other countries to live a life there and kind of have, I mean, I have one friend, she's got bank accounts in 3 countries right now, one of them being the US. Um, And I don't know if this falls into like forex trading or not. But anyway, but yes, lots of foreign bank accounts. I actually had somebody ask me the other day, "Hey, how can we shift things around and get stuff to foreign bank accounts?" I'm like, "For what reason?" So if
Well,
it's
and
to avoid
that goes back
taxes,
to it, right?
that's right. If it's
Yeah.
to avoid taxes, it's probably not a good thing.
Yeah, everybody, just because you've got a bank or in Panama that you've got money in, you still have to pay taxes on that to the U.S. Again,
Mhm.
it's theirs, right?
Mhm.
And I'm kidding a little bit, but no, you have to claim those. So if you've got accounts that total over, a cumulative, not just in each account, but cumulative $10,000 or more, there's a form that you need with the U.S. government to let them know, hey, again, they want their tax dollars. And the thing is, the taxes, I don't want to call it a game, uh, but there are a lot of rules and a lot of benefits and opportunities you have, especially if you're self-employed and things like that, to take legitimate deductions, um, that you don't have to pay in the grant. Again, that's the difference between you trying to do the taxes on your own, or
Right.
talking to any of those brick and mortar stores. You see them, especially around tax time. They'll have somebody else spinning a sign or something like that. Those are tax preparers. You want a tax advisor that will prepare your taxes for you, but also give you good, legitimate, sound advice on preparing taxes properly, so you can maximize your legitimate deductions,
Mhm.
maximize those tax savings, and not get in trouble with the IRS and be tempted to do something that you shouldn't really be doing anyway. I mean, it's goes back to the biblical, right? Render unto Caesar what is here his. I don't know the exact quote or the verse, but it's just one of those things that it is what it is.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure you're doing it right. Have somebody that's advising you, unless you know your stuff and you've got a good software system or something like that. But just to kind of recap, the big triggers, the top 5 triggers on an IRS audit: unreported income. That's number one. Number two is claiming unauthorized deductions or tax credits, things like that. Number three is if you have lots of rounded numbers or math errors on the actual forms you're submitting to the IRS. Number four is those COVID related withdrawals. If you had one of those, you want to make sure you're following the rules of that, because they're going to be looking really closely at that. And then number five, having those foreign bank accounts, and they will find out about it. The IRS has their ways, right? The U.S. government can look into a lot of. They have long-reaching arms. Let's just put
Yeah.
it that way, so they can find a lot of stuff. But again, work with a solid tax advisor, have them help you guide you through those exemptions and deductions and things like that. And make sure you're claiming all your income and whatnot. And if you've got multiple streams of income, make sure you keep a checklist of it. And you should be keeping track of that stuff year round, not just oh crap, it's April 2nd, I should probably pull all this stuff together.
Yeah.
It'll be a lot less stressful, believe me. Many moons ago, that used to be me. And then I brought in my money team, and
Mhm.
part of that was bookkeeping, and then also the tax advisory stuff. So, and my life is so much less stressful. So anyway, anything else
Yeah.
to add on that, Wendy?
No, just to reiterate, I, for too many years, tried to keep up with it all myself. I mean, I had somebody do my taxes, but no bookkeeper. And this year I'm doing it differently because it's too much stress. It's to keep up with. And I would do the spreadsheets at the end of the year and yeah,
Yeah,
no
I
fun.
was I used to be the biggest crank butt, in January, trying to pull that crap together. And I had it, but it was just like going through, double checking, making sure I didn't miss anything. And now, I have quarterly meetings with my bookkeeper, and it's great. She does all the reports for me, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay. And then at the end of the year, it's like, okay, here's your form, give it to your
Yeah.
tax advisor. And it's like, okay, cool. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's so much less stress. And that's one of the things, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, everybody, but reinvest in your business.
Yeah.
Don't try to go cheap on, a support system and stuff like that, because in the end, you're going to spend a lot more time and stress and worry on something that could have been outsourced to somebody who's better suited for that. Know what you know, and know, who knows what you don't know, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, well, that's all we got today, folks. Again, glad to have you here for another Money Moves. Hopefully this information is good for you. If it is, please give us a comment, below. That would be awesome. And don't forget to show us some love. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you're clicking that like and subscribe. If you're on podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple, or one of the others, give us a comment, give us a little love with a like, and share it, because that's going to help us grow the network. And again, we're here to help. So if you do need help with your personal finances, please don't hesitate to reach out to Wendy Lee or myself, Jon C. I'm at Black Swan Money online, and she's at Wendy Lee online as far as our social media. So next Tuesday, we've got another exciting money moves for you. So make sure you're there, 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central, and we will talk to you then. Bye, everybody.
Bye.